All right, hello everybody. Welcome to Lieutenant Colonel John Miles' talk about unicorns, selkies, kelpies, and magical Celtic critters. My name is Matt Steinmetz, and I'm the Patron Training and Technology Coordinator for the Lexington County Public Library System. And it is my pleasure to have this first adult summer reading program. We're trying this virtually. I'm asking everybody to have some patience with us while we test this thing out. This is our first run, so hopefully everything goes okay. I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping for everybody. A couple things I wanted to point out. On the right side of your screen, there's a chat function where you can send chats to me. I am going to watch the chat box. If you have questions for John Miles, I'm going to ask them to him as they get posted. We'll maybe take a couple breaks. He'll talk a little bit, take a couple breaks to answer some questions. And at the end of it, he's going to hopefully be able to answer some more questions that get asked. I've muted everybody. So everybody except for Mr. Miles, for Lieutenant Colonel John Miles, is going to be muted. And we also have your cameras turned off. So if you try and talk to the screen, nothing's going to happen. So check out that little chat section down there at the bottom. You can type me a message and I will see it and I will convey it to John. So I'd like to, without any further ado, introduce Lieutenant Colonel John Miles. He's a retired U.S. military or U.S. Marine Corps officer and former college professor. He now delivers lectures on Scottish history and other historical topics to groups. He's presented lectures to multiple Scottish Highland Games and Celtic festivals throughout the United States. He holds or has held membership in the following organizations: the Clan Gillian, am I pronouncing that right?
You are.
Okay. The Scottish American Military Society, the Scottish American Society of Palm Beach, the St. Andrews Society of Albany, New York, the Scottish American Society of Tidewater, Virginia, the Robert Burns Society of the Midlands of South Carolina. He received his master's degree in military studies from American Military University. He has a bachelor's degree in anthropology with a minor in history from Texas A&M. He's a 6-time published author in the Marine Corps Gazette, the professional journal of the United States Marine Corps. His article on Highland Regiment service in North America was published by Scott's Heritage Magazine in its spring 2017 edition. I'm going to take a little break here, and before we get started, I want to ask somebody to check out that chat section and tell me, can you see and hear me okay? And can you see Lieutenant Colonel John Miles? Will somebody post in the chat section for me? I'm going to type a question. Hopefully you guys can see it. Can you see and hear us? So if somebody can type back, that would be great. Let's see. All right, I'm going to assume that everybody can see and hear us. So John, if you want to go ahead and get started, you can do your talk, and I'll be here in the background looking at the chat section. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat section. And John, go ahead and get started.
All right. Thank you, Matt.
Yep.
All right, everybody. Félcha, which is Gaelic for welcome. Now, I'm showing my kill right now because this is a presentation about Scottish and Irish mythical creatures. I figured I'd wear my kill. All right. Today we're talking about unicorns, kelpies, selkies, and other magical Celtic creatures. And I will have several breaks built on this presentation. So if you do have questions, as Matt said, go ahead and send them to him via chat. And then during those breaks, Matt will ask me the questions and I can answer. Okay, just hold on. I'm trying to get the my press. There we go. Much better. Okay, now before we can talk about magical Celtic creatures, we have to talk about the AOC. The AOC is a Gaelic term for supernatural beings in Irish and Scottish mythology, comparable to the fairies or elves. They are said to live underground in fairy mounds across the Western Sea, which, if you look at Ireland, the Western Sea is the Atlantic Ocean that leads to America, or in an invisible world that coexists with the world of humans. Now, this world is described as a parallel universe in which the AOC walk amongst us. In the Irish language, AOC means people of the mounds, and the mounds are known in Irish as the Sidhe. Now, these fairies are variously said to be ancestors, the spirits of nature, or goddesses and gods. All right. Now, fairy, also spelled F-A-E-R-I or F-A-E-R-Y, is a mythical being of folklore and romance, usually having magic powers and dwelling on Earth in close relationship with humans. Now, originally in the Celtic religion, there were deities in Gaul, which is modern-day France, Spain, and Britain during the Roman occupation. The Romans actually came over and took over the British Isles around 600 BC. Now, but that situation changed when Christianity spread to the west and the north. These deities that were worshipped before the conversion of Christianity were then relegated to the status of fairies in Celtic mythology. Now, in the Celtic tradition, the former deities were shapeshifters and assumed various forms. They could choose to look very much like humans in size and shape, but still have special magical powers. And they also seem eternally young, with some exceptions. Now, the fairy folk were seen as a race of usually fair, meaning attractive-looking people. Now, they could die just as mortals can, but their lives could also last hundreds, even thousands of years. All right. This cereal I'm showing here, I'm sure everybody recognizes, is Lucky Charms. All right. On the left, the Lucky Charms leprechaun. The leprechaun was one of the fairies in Irish mythology. Now, he was a solitary fairy. They had two different types of fairies. They had trooping fairies, which were fairies that went in groups, and solitary fairies that were fairies that stayed by themselves. And the leprechaun was a solitary fairy. And actually, the legend of the leprechaun, the reason he has a pot of gold was because after the Vikings were kicked out of Ireland, they left him to watch it, all their treasure. So basically, the leprechaun was a Viking patsy. But now, the solitary fairies were supposed to wear red or brown caps, while the trooping fairies were supposed to wear green caps. So somebody needs to contact General Mills Corporation and let them know they got their fairy nomenclature all wrong. I'm sure they'll listen to you. All right. Now, alongside the human-looking AOC in the fairy world, there are numerous other mythical creatures believed to exist alongside humans. These included the unicorns, selkies, merrows, and kelpies. We'll talk about all those. All right, starting with the unicorns. Now, the unicorn is a mythological animal resembling a horse or goat with a single horn on its forehead. Now, the unicorn appeared in early Mesopotamian artworks and also is referred to in the ancient myths of India and China. Now, the earliest description in Western, meaning Greek literature, of a single-horned animal was by the historian Ctesias when he wrote about 400 BC. And he related that the Indian wild donkey was the size of a horse, and on his forehead had about 1.5 foot long horn. And the reason he was writing about the Indian wild donkey was because Alexander the Great marched into Southwest Asia. So the Greeks actually were exposed to these Indian wild donkeys. Now, he also wrote that those that drank from its horn were thought to be protected from stomach trouble, epilepsy, and poison. He also wrote it's very fleet of foot and difficult to capture. Now, the animal behind Cetesius' description was probably the Indian rhinoceros pictured there at the bottom of your screen. So, you got to think that Europeans with Alexander the Great's army going into India, and they saw that. They're like, what the heck is that? So that's where it came from. All right. Now, certain poetical passages of the Bible refer to a strong and splendid horned animal called a rhea. Now, this word was translated as unicorn or rhinoceros in many versions of the Bible, but most modern translations prefer wild ox, which are erex, which is the correct meaning of the Hebrew word rhea. So, now as a biblical animal, the unicorn was interpreted allegorically in the early Christian church. Now, one of the earliest such interpretations appears in the ancient Greek book known as the Physiologist, which states the unicorn is a strong, fierce animal that can be caught only if a virgin maiden is thrown before it. The unicorn will then leap into the virgin's lap, and she will nurse it and subdue it. Now, cups are reportedly made of unicorn horn, but actually made of a rhinoceros horn or narwhal tusk, were highly valued by important persons in the Middle Ages as a protection against poison drinks. And we're going to talk about the narwhal here in a little bit. Now, many fine representations of the hunt of the unicorn survive in medieval art, not only in Europe, but also in the Islamic world in China. So the unicorn's been a thing forever.
Hey, John, I'm going to ask you a question if that's okay.
That is just fine.
Okay, great. I got a question from Jennifer. She wanted to know whether or not the fairies legends, did they emigrate to the Americas, and were there beliefs in them here?
The answer is yes. So many of the traditions we have here in America come from Celtic mythology. Samhain was a Celtic holiday that was held at the end of the last harvest. You know when that was? Around October 30th. Samhain became Halloween. I've actually got another presentation just on Celtic and mythology's contributions to legends here in America. It's all over.
Great, thanks, John. You can keep on going. I hated to interrupt.
Absolutely. All right, now we're talking about Scotland's national animal. Now, Babylonians idolized this enchanting specimen, while people from the Indus Valley civilization incorporated the unicorn and ancient seals. That picture on the left of your screen, those are actually seals from the Indus Valley 2,000 years ago plus. They have unicorns on them. Now, similarly, unicorns feature written accounts from the ancient Greeks, Romans, and Persians. Now, the Scots had a thing for unicorns for a long time. As Scotland's national animal, this legendary creature served as a Scottish symbol for centuries. Let me repeat that. Just like the bald eagle is our national animal, the unicorn is Scotland's national animal. Now, this mythical beast, the unicorn, which is a white horse-like creature with a lion's tougher tail and a spiraling horn protruding from its forehead, has featured in many cultures as far back as the classical age, meaning like 3,000 years ago. There we go. All right, so now we're on to Celtic unicorns. Now, in Celtic mythology and folklore, unicorns are synonymous with purity, nobility, masculinity, power, courage, and an unrivaled sense of strength. They're just pretty much an all-around amazing critter. They also possess immense healing powers. The legend goes that a unicorn's horn has the ability to purify waters tainted and poisoned by snakes. Now, obviously, as before, St. Patrick kicked the snakes out of Ireland today. Even back then, you drink it from a unicorn horn, you're good. Now, mythology also states that these strong-headed creatures could only be caught by virgins, whose purity struck a chord with the equally as pure unicorns until they would fall asleep in the virgin's lap. Now, many see this as an allegory before the bond between Jesus Christ and the Virgin Mary. There we go. All right. The unicorn and its sacred bond with Scotland is associated with the Scottish heraldry. Now, heraldry is a system by which coats of arms and other armorial bearings are devised, described, and regulated. So any sort of like royal symbol or crown or a crest or whatever, that's a heraldry. Now, praised for its pride and strength, this noble beast featured on an early royal Scottish coat of arms by King William I in the 12th century. So all the way back in the 1100s, the unicorn was associated with Scotland. Now, during the 15th and 16th centuries, gold coins were embossed with the unicorn. The Scottish royal coat of arms came to include 2 unicorns protecting the shield until 1707, when Scotland and England united and a line was added. So for your information, there was no Great Britain before 1707. That 1707 Act of Union is what brought the British and Scottish crowns together and became Great Britain and united. So there was no United Kingdom or Great Britain before 1707. Now today, United Kingdom's royal coat of arms still showcases a unicorn for Scotland and a lion for England. In Scotland, however, the unicorn is accentuated by the addition of a crown and is placed on the left-hand side. And the reason that's important, if you think of looking from that crest to us, whatever is on the right side, which when we look at it would be on the left side, is the most important asset. Even in the military around the world today, the senior military unit goes on the right side of the line. That just shows seniority. So in Scotland, they put the unicorn on that side to show their senior. Where in England, they flip it. Okay, what are you gonna do? All right. Now, notably, Scottish unicorns are always portrayed with golden chains wrapping around their neck and body. Now, some liken these to the unicorn's intense strength, wild temperament, and determined will, while others view it as a symbol of Scottish kings. The unicorn qualities historically include innocence, purity, boldness, pride, healing powers, joy, intelligence, virility, and nurturing powers. So pretty much any good adjective, you just put it with a unicorn. All right, now on the left, I'm showing you a picture of His Majesty's Frigate Unicorn in Dundee, Scotland. Going to talk more about that. All right, here is another picture of His Majesty's Frigate Unicorn in Dundee, Scotland. Now, HMS Unicorn is a sailing frigate of the British Royal Navy. It was launched in 1824. Now, this is a transitional period for shipbuilding, as suitable timber was becoming more difficult to obtain, and iron was increasingly available. Now, the reason the timber was becoming more difficult was because there in Great Britain, they pretty much cut down all the trees. And before the American Revolution, they would get timber from here in America. But obviously, after the Revolution, they couldn't get that. So they started having a hard time getting timber. Now, as Unicorn was built shortly after the naval wars against Napoleon ended, she was never rigged, meaning they never put masts and sails on her. She only went to sea one time for a voyage from Chatham, where she was built, to Dundee, Scotland, during which she was under tow. Now, a superstructure was built over her main deck, and she was laid up in ordinary. serve as a hulk and a depot ship for the most of the next 140 years. Now, laid up in ordinary means it was not going to go to fight. They would just use it for storing stuff. Now, her lack of active duty left her timbers well preserved, and in the 1960s, steps were initiated to convert her into a museum ship. Now, the roof that covers her upper deck was thought to be original, although portions of it were removed in the 1970s, which had led to the replacement of the forecastle roof. Now, forecastle is a nautical term for forward castle. That's like the superstructure on the very front of the ship, forward castle. Now, this is part of the National Historic Fleet. Unicorn is now a museum ship in Dundee, Scotland. She's one of the oldest ships in the world, still around, and is the last intact British warship from the age of sail. Now, here in America, we have the USS Constitution, which predates this ship by a little bit, but those two ships are pretty much the last sailing warships in the world, close to it. And notice what's on the front of the ship. Once again, the unicorn. All right. Now we're going to talk about the unicorn and narwhal connection that I mentioned a little bit earlier. All right. Narwhals are pale colored porpoises found in the North Atlantic coastal waters. The animals have two teeth. In males, the more prominent tooth grows into a sword-like spiral tusk up to 10 feet long. Now, the ivory tooth goes right through the narwhal's upper lip. So it comes literally out of his upper lip. Now, narwhal horns found on beaches that made their way into markets in medieval Europe probably contribute to the legend of the unicorn, because they seems to be found on the beach and people had no idea what they were. They're like, what is this? Oh, it's a unicorn horn. Okay. Now, narwhals were first well documented in 1555. And they make an appearance in Herman Melville's Moby Dick and Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Now, as for the tusks, they're not used for hunting other creatures, but instead are more like antlers on a stag deer, used to establish hierarchy among the males. So, all right. I'll take a moment here to see if anybody has any questions about unicorns that you want to chat to Matt, and he will ask me.
Yeah, so if anybody has any questions, feel free to click on that little question icon and shoot me a question, and I can ask it from John. I think we had a couple technical issues, but looks like we've solved them. Just FYI, if you guys are watching this, there's a little gray bar that you can move up and down on your end, where you can see John at the top and his presentation at the bottom. So if you want to make him bigger or make that presentation bigger, you can move that little gray bar up and down. But does anybody have any questions so far? All right, I think we're good to go, John.
All right, excellent. All right, moving on from the unicorns. We're now going to talk about Scottish selkies. Now, selkies were not only in Scotland, they're over in Ireland too, but there are a lot of interchangeable names for these various critters, and you'll see that as I go on. All right, the Scots language word selkie is diminutive for selch, which strictly speaking means gray seal. That's what a selch was. Now in Orkney lore, you look on the map on the right of the screen, and you'll see the islands of, it's a chain of islands of Orkney and Shetland. And those lie to the north coast of Scotland. Now in Orkney lore, so the islands associated with Orkney down there to the lower group of islands, selkie is said to denote various seals of greater size than the gray seal, and only these are credited with the ability to shapeshift into humans and are called selkie folk. Now, the type of large seals that have been seen on the islands include the Greenland seal, which also known as a harp seal, and the crested seal, also known as a hooded seal. Now, something similar is stated in the Shetland tradition to those islands and a little bit north, that the mermen and mermaids prefer to assume the shape of larger seals, referred to as the hoff fish. Now, that word hoff is not Gaelic, it's actually Viking, because the Vikings colonized Shetland Orkney. And also they colonized a lot, big chunks of Western Scotland too. So for a long time, they owned those islands. And so the hobfish was a Viking word for these seals. All right, Selkie legends. Now, a typical folk tale is of a man that finds and steals a female Selkie skin after he sees her naked on the seashore, and thus compels her to become his wife. Now, but the wife will spend her time in captivity longing for the sea, her true home, and will often be seen gazing wistfully at the ocean. Now, she may bear several children by her human husband, but once she finally finds her skin, she will immediately return to the sea and abandon human family. Now, in the typical folktale, she is never seen again by the human family. However, in one version, about once a year, the children will witness a large seal approach them and greet them plaintively by the seashore. So they'd go down the beach, and this large seal would come up to them and talk to them. And they knew that was her mom. Now, male selkies are described as being very handsome in their human form and having great seductive powers over human women. They typically seek those who are dissatisfied with their lives, such as married women waiting for their fisherman husband to return from the sea. Because back in the day, if you lived in the islands of Scotland and you were a man, you went to sea. You became a fisherman. That's what you did. So you were gone all the time. And so these women are very lonely and not really happy. Now, one popular version about a certain Ursula of Orkney. Okay, the picture I'm showing is from Disney's Little Mermaid. The reason the author of this story named that creature Ursula was because she is familiar with the tales of Scottish mermaid or Scottish selkies. And we're back to Ursula of Orkney. It was rumored that when she wished to make contact with her male selkie, she would shed 7 tears into the sea. And the male selkie would be able to pick that up and come see her. Now, children born between human and seal folk may have webbed hands, as in the case of the Shetland mermaid, whose children had a sort of a web between their fingers. And we're going to talk more about this here later, too. Ursula was rumored to have children seared by the male selkie, and that the children had webbing between their fingers and toes made of a horny material that had to be chipped away intermittently so people wouldn't automatically identify them as a selkie. All right,
Hey,
selkie superstitions.
John, I had a question from one of the folks who was watching. Can I interrupt you for a second?
Absolutely.
So Andrea wanted to know, she thought that this was a really interesting topic, and she wanted to know, how did this become a focus of yours? How did you get interested in this topic?
Well, my family ethnicity is mainly Scottish, along with some Irish and English. And we actually took a family trip over to Scotland about 20 years ago and got to go see the old family castles and had an awesome time. And just being over there, I was just amazed with the history in the place. And, you know, I didn't put in my mind at that time because I was in the Marine Corps and I went there that I was going to do this when I got out of the Marine Corps, but I was just fascinated by it. And I was telling Matt earlier, I did 28 years in the Marine Corps. I went in right after high school when I was 18 and then stayed for 28 years. Anytime somebody is in the military that long, when they get out, the question is, what now? Because you can retire from the military after 20 years. So basically, if you go in right out of high school when you're 18, you can retire when you're 38. You're going to have to do something for the rest of your life. I mean, you can just sit at home, but I think you probably go insane. So when I was thinking, okay, what can I do now as a civilian that I enjoy doing as a Marine, it came to me that I love teaching history. I would teach my Marines all about battle studies and wars and stuff like that. I love doing it. And I actually did that at university when I worked for an NRTC department. So when I got out, I'm like, well, I really don't feel like going back to college to get my PhD to become a college professor again. Where can I teach history with only a master's degree? And the answer was libraries, Highland Games, and Celtic festivals. So that's how I got into this. And I just, once again, am fascinated by Celtic history. So I would just read and study about it, and I'll see something interesting and say, wow, that would make a cool presentation. And then I'll build it.
Great, thanks, appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, now we can talk about Selkie superstitions. Now, according to some versions, the selkie can only assume human form once every 7 years, because the selkies were bodies that housed condemned souls. There's a notion that they were either humans who committed sinful wrongdoing and were basically in a type of purgatory, or were fallen angels. Now, it was only during hard times that people of the Scottish Isles would kill seals to make use of their skin and blubber, because it was thought the killing of a seal would result in misfortune for the perpetrator. And there's a tale of crofters, which is the Scottish word for farmers, who brought their sheep to graze upon a small group of isles within the Orkney Islands. One summer, a man placed 7 sheep on the largest isle. Now, when he went back to the mainland on his way home from grazing sheep, the man saw and killed a seal. That night, all the man's sheep disappeared. However, the other crofters who had not killed a seal did not lose a single sheep. So when people say that's just proof, you don't kill seals. All right. Now, some stories from the Shetlands have selkies luring islanders into the sea in midsummer, with the lovelorn humans never returning to dry land. And once again, both the male and the female selkies, when they become human, are very attractive. So, in Shetland, the sea folk were believed to revert to human shape and breathe air in their submarine homeland. But with their sea dress, which is their seal skin, they had the ability to transform into seals to make transit from there to the surface. Now, however, each skin was unique and irreplaceable. So if they lost it, they could never return home beneath the sea. Now, another version of the selkie are the fin folk, but they are always malevolent, mean. They capture human beings and force them into a marriage and slavery. And they are said to live in a huge palace underwater, and they visit the Orkney Islands looking for human spouses. But once again, with them, the humans don't go willingly. They just grab and take them to water. All right. Any questions about selkies? Once again, just please send them to Matt via chat, and he will ask.
Yeah, so if anybody has any questions about what selkies are or questions for John in general, feel free to type them in there. We'll give them a couple seconds. If anybody has any questions, you just tap on that little question mark and you type in a question. I'll read it out to John. All right. I don't see any questions popping up, so well, hold on. Give me just a second. There's a couple popping up right now.
Excellent.
Yeah. Do you know about this is from Donna. Do you know about any movies or popular books that have selkies in them?
I know that there is a Celtic musical group called the Selkie Girls, which are actually, I heard them at a Celtic festival, and they are awesome. I know that there are, I can't remember off the top of my head the name of the books, but I know that there have been several books written about selkies, because they were so popular in Scottish mythology. Everybody in Scotland knows about and selkies. They always have. So there have been so much interest in them. I do know for a fact, I've seen the books. I just can't remember off the top of my mind what the name of the books are, but there are a lot of them.
Gotcha. Then Ben asked a question. He said, if the selkies, if they're condemned souls, he wanted to know what they were condemned with, or how they had actually been.
That I have never seen an answer for that, but that was just, one of the things when people were trying to explain the existence of these selkies. They're like, well, why do they exist? Why are they transforming into humans? Well, why? And then people just say, oh, well, they're condemned souls that are being punished for 7 years or whatever, because 7's a holy number. That's punished for 7 years to look like a seal, but they can flip back and forth between human and seal. So yeah, I don't think there was ever any clear-cut answer to that, but that's just what people thought sounded good. So there you go.
All right, great. I'll let you get back to it. Thanks.
All righty, moving on. Now we're talking about merrows, the Irish mermaid and merman. All right, the merrow or mora. All right, the word merrow, which once again Irish is mora, comes from the Irish mer, meaning sea, and meaning maid, and refers specifically to the female species. Mermen, male merrows, are rarely seen. Now, merrows themselves are extremely beautiful and are promiscuous in their relations with mortals. Now, the merrow differs physically from humans in the fact that her feet are flatter than those of a mortal, and her hands have a thin webbing between the fingers. And once again, we're talking about all these physical anomalies here in a little bit. So once again, the pictures we have of mermaids have her, as a fish bottom half and even top. That was not accurate. The Irish merrows just had very flat feet for swimming and webbing between the fingers. Now, it should not be assumed that merrows are kindly and well disposed towards mortals. As members of the Sidhe or Irish fairy world, the inhabitants of Turf and Thurn, which is Irish for the land beneath the waves, have a natural antipathy towards humans. Now, in some parts of Ireland, they are regarded as messengers of doom and death. So even though they look beautiful, they're bad news. So you see when I go, that's a beautiful merrow, but yeah, you didn't want to see it because something bad was going to happen. Now in Ireland, sailors and people who live by the seashore had a whole gamut of merrow lore. In Irish writer W.B. Yeats' collection of Irish folktales, there's an entire section dedicated to nothing but stories of merrows. One of the famous stories is about the soul-stealing Irish merrow. One particularly frightening story tells about a tale of merrows who captured the drowned souls of sailors and trapped them in pots. These pots are then sunk to the bottom of the sea, never to release the poor sailors' souls, unless a willing human was down there to turn the pot over and let the soul out, which back in the day before scuba diving, I'm not sure how people get down there, but what are you going to do? All right, now the male merrows were said to be malevolent and incredibly ugly. And perhaps this is why we have stories of female merrows seducing human men. The mermaids would seduce young men by singing to them. So apparently they had beautiful voices too, as well as looking beautiful, and they dragged them to the bottom of the sea. Now, no one knows if they were then made into mermen themselves or they drowned. But once again, this gets back to the whole thing of merrows look good, but may not have your best interest at heart. Now, a favorite story of a supposedly real mermaid encountered is the story of an Irishman who found two merrows on the seashore that had been washed up in a bad storm. Now, one was badly hurt, the other was dead. The man wanted to help the injured merrow and took her home to nurse it back to health. He kept the merrow in a tub of water and fed it shellfish and milk. Now, this occurred in the 1800s, and it was a big story in the local newspaper. Now, I'm not sure if investigative journalism was a thing back then, so I have no idea if the reporters actually said, well, hey, why don't you show us a merrow, and who knows. But anyways, very popular newspaper article.
I had a quick question for you, John. It came up. This is going back to selkies. Do you know if selkies, if there's any instances where they're put on the front of ships like unicorns were? And Nicole was asking that question. If you've ever seen it.
Yes. They have. I know they have had selkies as figureheads on ships. I mean, they had the unicorn as a figurehead. Usually the figurehead of an old sailing ship would be a woman for good luck, but I can absolutely guarantee you that somebody put a selkie on there. I have seen that.
Great. All right. Thanks.
I wish I knew the name of the ship. I don't, but I have seen that.
I'll let you get back to it.
All right. Now, merrows have special clothing to enable them to travel beneath the ocean currents. Because once again, the modern pictures like this one up here shows that she has a human top and a fish's body. That's not the case back in the Irish legends. They would wear a small red cap made from feathers. Or, like the selkies, they would travel through the sea wrapped in sealskin cloaks, taking on the appearance and attributes of seals. Now, in order to come ashore, the Merrow would have to abandon her cap and cloak. So that any mortal who finds these has power over her, and she cannot return to the sea until she finds them again. By hiding the cap or cloak, a human may persuade the Merrow to marry him, and such brides can be extremely wealthy, with fortunes plundered from shipwrecks. And that was actually how the mermaids made their money. Was a ship would sink, they would go down there and loot it. Now, eventually, the Merrow will always recover her cap cloak and find her urge to return to the sea so strong that she would leave her human husband and children behind. Many coastal dwellers have taken on Merrows as lovers, according to legend, and a number of famous Irish families claim their descent from such unions. Notably, the O'Flaherty and O'Sullivan families of County Kerry and the McNamara's of Clare. Now, the reason I got that highlighted in yellow, my wife's maiden name is McNamara. And yes, her family came from County Clare in Ireland. So I married a mermaid, but she hadn't found a cap yet, so still got her. Just don't tell her where it's at. All right, now we're on to Kelpies. All right, the Kelpie is a shape-shifting water spirit inhabiting the lochs of Scotland. Now, a loch is a Gaelic word for lake, and that's actually how we get the English word lake from the Gaelic word loch. That's where it came from. Now, it's usually described as a black horse-like creature that is able to adopt the human form. Although some accounts state that the horse or the Kelpie retains its hooves when appearing as human, leading to association with the Christian idea of Satan, as alluded to by poet Robert Burns in his 1786 poem, Address to the Devil. Robbie Burns is the poet laureate of Scotland, and as a matter of fact, we've all heard of one of his poems, Auld Lang Syne. What we sing every year at New Year's was written by Robbie Burns. Now, almost every sizable body of water in Scotland has an associated Kelpie story, but the most extensively reported is that of Loch Ness. And everybody knows what else comes from Loch Ness. Little monster. Or not a little monster, actually a big monster. All right. Now, in Scottish folklore, Kelpies were also known as water horses or water bulls. And the Kelpie legend is so popular, in fact, that there's a large water Kelpie statue in Falkirk that's quite a popular tourist attraction today. And on the bottom of your screen, you got pictures of that. You got a picture on the left of it at nighttime and a picture of it on the right during the daytime. Very, very big statues. And tens of thousands of people a year go to those places. Now, the debate today persists on whether water kelpies are benevolent or malevolent, as it varies by legend. Now, some believe water kelpies were evil creatures, even demons, that drowned and or ate humans. Now, this story was told to deter small children from going too near the water, because back in the old days, most people couldn't swim. So yeah, if you were a sailor, you probably knew how to swim and could maybe teach your children how to swim too. But if you lived in landlocked part of Scotland, you probably never swam in your life, which meant that your kids couldn't swim either, because there wasn't any YMCA back then. So parents were always terrified of their children going to the lochs and drowning. So they would tell them about, hey, you go to the loch, Kelpie's gonna get you. Now, another legend says that water kelpies shifted shape in the likeness of good-looking young men to seduce young women, eventually dragging them underwater to their untimely deaths. So once again, if you're a kid or a young woman, you were told not to go near the loch because the kelpie's going to get you. All right. However, it was possible to catch and marry a water kelpie. Now, some water kelpies were forced to stay in a human form and therefore wed their human captors. Typically, the story told of a silver bridle removed from the water kelpie's neck and hidden in order to keep them in even form. Interestingly, the silver bottle of the water kelpie is very similar to the Merrow's magical red cap and the Selkie sealskin, all the same type steel, same type deal. Now, there are also stories of water kelpies without a bridle captured by tacking it, which means putting a halter on it, which was blessed with a symbol of a cross on it. And then that way you could capture them that way. Now, others say that water kelpies are harmless to humans, but they might cause a bit of mischief on local waterways. They're actually ancient water spirits that guard the sacred locks in Scotland. So most of the legends had them being kind of bad. And once again, that was probably because people want to keep their kids away from the water, but who knows? All right, now we're going to talk about the theories and origins of the legends. All right. Now, before the advent of modern medicine, any physiological conditions were untreatable. When children were born with any noticeable abnormality, it was common to blame fairies, because back then people had no idea why these things happened. Why is this kid look different than the other kids? They seem healthy, but why they look different? Why? Oh, it's the fairies. The Macudrum clan of the Outer Hebrides, that the Hebrides are the islands of the west coast of Scotland. To the north of Scotland, you have the Shetlands and the Orkneys. To the west coast, you have the Hebrides. Anyway, they became known as the Macudrums of the Seals, as they claimed to be descended from a union between a fisherman and a selkie. Now, this is an explanation of the syndactyly. Syndactyly is on the left. That is a genetic hereditary growth of skin between the fingers that made their hands resemble flippers. And if you look at that, and that, you know, if a kid born with that, perfectly healthy, but people are like, how come he hands like that? Oh, well, yeah, part selkie. Now, children born with scaly skin were also thought to be descendants of selkies. Now, this is caused by ichthyosis, a genetic skin condition that causes patches of skin to harden and appear scaly, which is the picture up there on the top. Now, this condition can be severe, appearing all over the body, and when that happens, that's called ichthyosis vulgaris, but usually only causes slight abnormalities. So a lot of times people just have it like maybe on their legs or their arms. But once again, people look at me like, what's wrong with you? Oh, I'm part seal. Oh, okay. All right. Sure. Now, others have suggested that the traditions concerning the Selkies may have been due to misinterpreted sightings of Finmen. Now, the Finmen were Inuit from Greenland, which we call, you know, here in America, the Inuit up there in Alaska, Eskimos. They also live in Greenland. And because Greenland was so close to the rest of Northern Europe, occasionally these Inuit would be sighted in the ocean. And actually, the Vikings colonized Greenland for a while. So, yeah. So people would see them. And because these Inuit wore clothes and used kayaks made of animal skins, including mainly seal skin, both the clothes and the kayaks would get wet and lose buoyancy when they're saturated. So they have to be dried out. So seal skin kayak will float, but once again, when it becomes saturated with water, after a while, it starts to lose buoyancy. Now, it's thought that these sightings of Inuit divesting themselves of their clothing, or like next to the skins on the rocks, would have led to the belief in their ability to change from a seal to human. So these Europeans would see these people doing this and laying naked on the rock, drying out themselves while their clothes dried out. Like, oh, wow. Yeah, they're selkies. Now, another theory is that shipwrecked Spaniards were washed ashore and their jet black hair resembled seals. Now, that may seem kind of ridiculous, but Spain had a long history of a seaborne trade with Ireland. And they would sail up there all the time since back in the days of the Romans. They'd be going up there. And actually, the British Isles were known as the Copper Isles because you could mine copper there, which it was one of the few places in Europe you get it. So they go up there all the time to trade, and people say, oh, you know, when they get wrecked on the shore and you know, swim ashore, like, oh, yeah, he's a seal. He's a selkie. Look at his hair, it's all jet black. Now, there's a strong body of lore that In the case of selkies, are said to be supernaturally formed from the souls of drowned people. So once again, where some people said, oh, they're basically a repository for a sinful person for 7 years. Other people said, no, they're the souls of drowned people. So when a sailor drowned or whatever, he would turn to a selkie. So. All right, got any questions or comments about mythological Celtic creatures?
Yeah, if anybody has any questions, feel free to post them. I'm going to leave this.
While some of y'all are doing that, please notice my website on the bottom of the slide, historical lectures, all one word.com. If you don't have a question right now, but you think of one after this presentation is over with, please go on my website. It's got a contact form that you can just type your question to and send it to me, and I will get it. I'll respond.
Yeah, and John is a wealth of information. He's done great presentations for us before. He's done programs on what is it, haunted South Carolina. That was a really good one. And I think you've done some Scottish history ones for us as well. So we appreciate your expertise and your willingness to come and talk to us. I've got a question here that Kathy's asked. She asked if you know about any amulets that were used to protect the people from selkies, the marrows, etc. In other words, did they have amulets or things to protect them from these creatures?
They did. One of the main amulets that they would have was after the introduction of Christianity, a cross, because it was believed that if you were wearing a crucifix, then you could not be molested by these creatures, couldn't be bothered. So a lot of times they would wear that, and I'm sure they had amulets before Christianity too. I don't know what they look like, but I have read about them. But yeah, after Christianity was introduced, that was another reason to wear a crucifix, not only to show that you're Christian, but hey, to keep the selkies away from you. It's all fun and games when one of them drags you in the water.
Right.
And then we don't know what happens. Maybe you become a selkie, or maybe you just drown. Who knows?
I'm going to leave that question box up. If there's any more questions, feel free to type them in there. I was going to ask you really quickly, John, if you've got a second to talk about, sounds like an interesting book that you've got coming out. If you want to give us a little rundown on what that's about. I know it hasn't been published yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. In addition to giving historical presentations, I write. And what I've written up to this point have been articles for historical magazines, for like military history, American Frontiersman, and the Highlander, as well as some other magazines that Matt mentioned in his introduction of me. But I finally got around to it and wrote an historical novel. And the novel is titled Magnus Saga Beyond Vinland. Now, Magnus is the guy's name. Vinland was what the Vikings called America, because we know for a fact they colonized Greenland, and then they came over to Nova Scotia, a la Meadow, and colonized that as well. And there's also been things found up there in that colony, like a beech nut shell. Beech nuts don't grow in that part of Canada. They grow, or excuse me, butternut shell. Butternuts don't grow in that part of Canada. Butternuts grow here in the Appalachians, in this part of the country. So we're pretty certain that the Vikings not only stopped there in Nova Scotia, but they came down here in America. So I actually wrote a book about one that did so. Magnus comes over here and he sails down the Hudson River in New York, interacts with all kinds of Native American tribes, teaches them how to smelt metal, because before Europeans got here to North America, there was very little metalworking. Teach them how to do that, finds things out from them, like about tobacco, which he takes back with him to Europe, and all kinds of other stuff. And it's also got a part in the novel about his wife back in Norway, who is a shield maiden. Shield maidens were female Viking warriors because what would happen was when all the men in the village left to go on a Viking raid, the village was undefended because only males back would be children or old people. So if that village got attacked, there was nobody defended. So these women would actually basically be militia to defend the village if attacked. And they were known as shield maidens. So, but the book's about all that.
Sounds interesting. I'm looking forward to it. Christine had a question. She wanted to know, all of these are water-based creatures. Were there any land-based mythological creatures other than the wolver? And I'm not familiar with the wolver. Maybe you mentioned it, but
there were all kinds of land-based mythical creatures. Once again, the leprechaun was one of them, but there were all kinds. The leprechaun, once again, was a solitary fairy because they had the solitary and the trooping. They had two different groups of fairies because there were so many of them that they were all over the place. And once again, some of them would look, there were ones that would look like horses. And they would actually stop by your house and people would see that and say, oh, wow, somebody lost a horse and I don't see, brand on it or whatever, must be my horse. And then they would get on the horse's back and they would take the person on a terrifying ride before finally returning them back to where it got it from. So there were all kinds of critters. Now, most of the fairies were humanoid looking to some degree, but there were also all kinds of ones that could shapeshift into animals as well. So yeah, that presentation, I love giving it because it talks about it's like they just had such fertile imaginations.
pretty wide variety, it sounds like. I think, let's see, there's another question that you mentioned that you were in the Appalachian area, Appalachia Mountains area, and Lisa was curious where you were from up in that area, or if you, I guess maybe did you live there or?
Well, I did not live there. My family's actually from Tennessee, but they're from Middle Tennessee. But it was funny because my dad told me that he was a kid back in the days before air conditioning. In the summertime, everybody that had money in Tennessee went to the mountains to get away from the heat. And it is true because I give presentations up at Grandfather Mountain Highland Games, which is right on the border of North Carolina and Tennessee. And it's in July, but because it's such high elevation of more than 7,000 feet, it's actually cool in the evening. I'm like, oh, wow. Come from Columbia. I'm like, wow, this is a novelty. But but I have spent, we would go to Tennessee every year growing up to visit the grandparents, and we would go in the mountains. Love the Appalachians. Love them.
Great. Well, I appreciate it. I want to thank you for spending your evening with us and doing this talk for us. Hopefully we'll have you back soon with another topic. If you have any questions about any of our future programs, just take a look at our website. It's lexicolibrary.com, and we have all of our summer reading programs listed there. Thanks for attending, and thanks, John, for sharing your knowledge with us. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I've enjoyed it very much. Hope everybody enjoyed the presentation. And once again, please go to my website, Historical Lectures, not only to ask me questions, but I also list all of my upcoming presentations on there. So, and once this whole COVID-19 thing starts slowing down, those will ramp back up. But hope everybody has a wonderful week. Thank you.
Great. I appreciate it. Thanks, John.